But I started reading about it, about being an introvert, about being intuitive, about being having a judging personality type where you're very organized, all these things, and I was like, "Oh, this is exactly what I needed." I just felt like something finally understood me. Um, I asked questions today in my stories on Instagram. Asked if any, and somebody asked me to tell my story of self-discovery and then also how to solve an INFJ identity crisis, which I feel like a lot of us have. So that's what we're going to talk about. First of all, I wanted to start with my story. Um, I grew up in the Midwest feeling very shy, very left out, misunderstood. I never really had a whole lot of friends, but I had lots of big dreams, and I loved to learn, and I loved um, to do really well in school. I was always the good girl who had like perfect straight A's. Um, that was like something that I prided myself in. And so I went to college, and college was a little bit more difficult. But I graduated from college in the middle of a recession, which was in 2010, and it was really difficult to find a job. So I thought, okay, I'll just go back to college. Um, I ended up spending like 10 years in college, and most of that was because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I chose something that I didn't like. And so then I decided to go back to college, and then it was like I was the older person in college. So again, I felt weird and out of place, misunderstood, all the things that I was used to feeling, right? I finally left college when I got a job, which I would have told you at the time was my dream job. I worked as a PR manager for a marketing company that managed race car drivers and sponsors, and I loved race cars. Anything that had to do with NASCAR, I just loved. And so I got to go to the racetrack every single weekend, and it was so much fun. Um, it was just everything that I had hoped and dreamed for and wanted. And then about, I would say about a year into that job, maybe a little bit less, I started feeling really, really bad. And it was such a contradiction for me too, because it was like, here I'm in this great job, I'm making more money than I've ever made in my life, and I'm miserable. And I don't know how to make myself happy. And it just felt like torture. And so I remember talking to one of my friends about it, and she was like, I think maybe you need to go see a counselor. And for me, like I had grew up with this big stigma around going to see a counselor and anybody with mental health disorders. So like I was super offended when she said that. Like, no, I'm not going to see a counselor. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not crazy. Um, but it got so bad that I ended up talking to her about it multiple times, and thankfully she was like, I have depression, and I have been going to see a counselor for years, and there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't make you crazy. It's just somebody to talk to, and somebody that, can maybe offer you some pointers on how to make your situation better, because obviously it's really bad. And I was like, well, yeah, it is really bad. So, okay, I guess I'll go see a counselor. I mean, if you're doing it and it's normal for you, then I guess I can do it, right? So I went to see a counselor, and after seeing her a few times, she was like, you have major depression. It's something that you've probably always had and will probably always have. Um, and then I went back to see her again, and she told me that I have an anxiety disorder. And I went back to see her again, and she said, you have an eating disorder. And I told her, I was like, I'm not going to come and see you anymore because every time I come in here, you tell me that I have something else. Um, and that was one of the great things about her was I could say anything to her and there was no judgment. There was no, um, you know, shame around it. And a lot of times I would tell her, like, she would say, this is what I think. And I would be like, no, that's so stupid. Like, that's not it. That, you were so off base with that. And then I would think about it for a couple of weeks and I would be like, ugh, she's actually really right. And so then I would go back and be like, yeah, I know I said that you were stupid, but actually, after I thought about it, I think maybe you're right. And I I realized that there is so much that I don't know. And I think part of that is in getting older too, you realize that, when you're young, you think you know everything. And then the older that you get, the more you realize, wow, I don't really know anything. And I'm more open to learning about things. I'm more open to hearing other people's experiences. And I really wanted to know more about myself. So after I was diagnosed with depression, I went down the road of looking for a medication that would work for me. And I want to be really clear. I think that medications do work for a lot of people who have depression, but they didn't work for me. I spent a year trying to find a medication that worked. And depression medication is different from a lot of other types of medication because most medications are like, you have a headache, you take Advil, your headache goes away in like 30 minutes. If you get an infection, you go to the doctor and you get antibiotics, the infection goes away within a couple of days, right? Well, and you don't really have a lot of side effects from those medications, right? But with antidepressants, there are a large number of side effects. And it doesn't work within 30 minutes or a couple of days. It takes 6 to 8 weeks to work. And so it's a process of saying, okay, how is this going to work? And it doesn't really make you feel like, it doesn't take away the depression. It makes you feel different. And for me, it made me feel numb. But depression made me feel numb too. So it was just kind of like a different type of numb. It made me not be able to feel good days. And it made the bad days a little bit less bad, but then there was also a lot of side effects, and the side effects were worse than the depression. So for me, I was like, this isn't going to work for me. I have to do something else. And I had to go to several different doctors to finally find a doctor that was like, you know what? Antidepressants don't work for everybody. And that's okay. You need to find something else that does work. And I was like, okay, well, what works? Do you have any suggestions? Because, I don't know anything about depression except that I feel really bad. And when you have depression, it's very difficult to do things. You just want to lay in bed and sleep. You want to just do nothing, right? So when they're like, okay, you need to go figure something out, you're like, ugh, no, I just want to sleep. I don't want to go do a bunch of research. I don't want to go to 12 different doctors before I find the right one. So thankfully, this between this doctor that I found and the counselor, they were like, well, yoga helps a lot, and so you should do yoga. And I was like, ugh, like exercise has never been my thing. I don't really want to do that. But they had, my counselor worked with a yoga instructor who was phenomenal. And so I started taking her classes and I felt a little bit better. And it was like, oh, there's hope. Oh, there is something that will make me feel better. And that little piece of hope was all that I needed to keep going, to keep finding something else, to start searching. And so I remembered that I had taken a personality test when I was in college. And I was so busy when I was in college that I had taken it and went, oh, this is cool, and then threw it in a box. And So I'm kind of a hoarder, which is actually a good thing sometimes. So I went and found this personality test, and I felt understood. I started reading about, I was mistyped actually back then as an INTJ, but started reading about it, about being an introvert, about being intuitive, about being having a judging personality type where you're very organized, all these things. And I was like, oh, this is exactly what I needed. I just felt like something finally understood me. And so then I wanted more of that, right? It's like I want to know all the things about all the personality types. And over a couple of years, I found so much hope and so much understanding in personality types that it really just changed so much about my life. Um, a couple of years after that, I got, sorry, there's a fire truck. I don't know if you can hear it, it's super loud. One of the fun things about living in the city. Um, a couple of years after that, I sort of got fired from that job. Um, and I was going to quit, but I got fired at the same time. So it was like, oh, cool. I don't have to tell you that I'm leaving because I didn't really want to tell my boss that, who I had learned was a terrible narcissistic person, which was probably half of my problem with depression. Um, so obviously it helped me a lot getting away from him, but then I had PTSD after being around him because he was such a horrifying person. I mean, he would tell me things like he would call me into his office and say, listen, your work is fantastic. It's like the best work that I've ever seen. But your personality is so terrible that nobody can stand to be around you. And you need to change it or you're not going to be able to work here. And I mean, that was like devastating for me. Not only because he was telling me that I'm a horrible person, right? But also because I couldn't get fired. I wasn't responsible enough at that time to have things like a savings account, and I was living by myself, so I was responsible for all of my bills, and I had a nice car that I was paying for, and I had to pay my rent and all of these things. So it was like, by him telling me that, it's like, you're a terrible person, and also if you don't stop being a terrible person, you're going to get fired and lose everything. And so I was like, I mean, that you can see where the PTSD came from for me, because it was like, I'm like, my personality is terrible. How do you change your personality? And I remember having a lot of conversations with my friends and my family about that, and they're like, I don't know, nobody's ever told me that before. And then, of course, well, he's awful and you need to get away from him. So I spent 3 years working for him. And then that was when I was diagnosed with depression and all those things. So then I get away from him, and it's like this process of coming down from all of that. It's relearning how to be a person, honestly, because you're so used to dealing with somebody who's so terrible and accommodating all of his needs and trying to predict when he's going to be awful and trying to navigate through his terribleness, that it's like massive people pleasing behaviors, and trying to overcome that is like, it's really difficult. So then I was in the job that I had for about 5 months, and then I got laid off. And that was another knock for me that was just like terrible and horrible. And talk about feeling bad, that was a whole nother road of, because when you already feel like you don't have enough confidence, you're already low on self-love, and then you get laid off. Looking for a job is like this whole process of self-love and confidence. And every time you get one of those emails that says, thanks, but no thanks, you're like, ugh, I'm just not worth it. I'm just not enough. Nobody's ever going to hire me again. You go through this whole thing that's just frustrating. And I was either unemployed or underemployed for a year and a half. And that was a lot. So it was a really bad thing, but it was actually a good thing because in that time I got to spend some time with my niece, and I was telling her all about personality types, and she got super excited about it. And so we started we learned her type, and then we started typing everybody that we knew and all of our favorite celebrities. We went to a bunch of New Kids on the Block concerts, and so we typed all the new kids, and we spent a lot of time talking about why it's important to know your personality type and how do you know other people's personality types. And through all of that, we were talking one day about how she had made her grandma upset. And I was trying to explain to her, she was like, she's an INTP, so she's very straightforward with what she says, and she focuses on facts and logic a lot, right? So in this conversation, she was like, but what I said was correct. And I'm like, I understand that, but you hurt your grandma's feelings. It's not that you said something that was incorrect, it's that the way that you said it was wrong. Like, it was painful for her, and you need to think about her feelings. And so through this conversation, my niece is like, I don't think that you're a thinking type. I think that you're a feeling type. And I was like seriously offended when she said that, because I had this idea in my head that people who had feeling personality types were like these super emotional people, who were like just overly emotional. And I had this idea of like loud outbursts of anger, or like people who cry a lot in public, which was totally wrong, but that was just my idea, right? So I was really offended when she said that. I'm like, you really think that I'm one of those crazy people who's like super emotional? And she's like, well, maybe that's not what it means. Maybe you should actually figure out what it means before you decide that feeling type people are crazy. And I'm like, oh, well, okay. Like, why didn't I think of that, right? So I started reading about feeling types, and I was like, oh, that's not what it means. You can have a feeling personality type and have really, really deep emotions and have a lot of emotions all the time and not share those emotions with people. They can be just something that you experience and you don't tell people about them. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. That is actually me. I do that all the time. And so that was how I decided that I was an INFJ. I read all of the descriptions of each one of the things and was positive that I was typed correctly this time. All of it made a lot more sense. And then as I was reading about INFJs, I realized that a lot of the information that is available is written based on theory. It's written by people who may or may not be INFJs. And they say, well, based on the theory of Myers-Briggs, this is how INFJs should act. And I was like, well, just because we should act that way doesn't mean that we actually do. Like, why isn't there any information that's written by an INFJ? And so around that time, I decided to move to Boston, which was like moving 2,000 miles away from where I was. And so I ended up moving, and that was a huge adventure for me. Another big life thing where I had a lot of things to figure out, and I did it by myself. So it's like this big accomplishment, but also a lot of stress and a lot of change. And I started a new job, and that job actually ended up being 10 times worse than the one where I worked with the guy who was narcissistic. So about 6 months after I started that job, Christmas time came around and I had 2 weeks off for Christmas, and I was like, I don't know what to do with 2 weeks. Like, I'm kind of a workaholic, so what do I do with 2 weeks off? Every time that December, January time frame starts to come around, I always want to start a new blog. I don't know what it is. I've started like 6 or 8 blogs, probably more than that over the years. And so this was 2018, and I'm like, I'm just going to start a blog. And I started my Instagram account, INFJ Woman, then, and I started writing my blog, and I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter if anybody reads it. I'm just gonna write it and see what happens. And maybe there's like one other person out there who is an INFJ who will benefit from this information. Maybe I can help one person who has depression or anxiety. Maybe just if there's one person, it'll be worth it, right? I never in a million years thought that there would be 60,000 people who would follow me on Instagram. I never thought there would be 12,000 people who follow me on Facebook. I never thought that 500,000 people would read my blog, ever. At that time, I didn't think that I would write a book. I didn't want to be on camera, so doing a live video was like horrifying to me. I wasn't going to do it. I never thought that I would have a podcast that has 150, almost 150,000 downloads. It's just, there's been so many things in my life that have changed because I started writing my blog. Just one decision that for me it was a little decision at that time. I mean, it was putting myself out there and putting my thoughts and feelings out there, which felt impossible at the time because it was like, oh, I'm not a good speller. I'm not good at English. The website looks terrible. That's not what I want it to look like, you know? And there was just all of these fears and doubts that were coming up. But it was also one of those things that was like, I just want to help somebody else. If I can help somebody else, then it's worth it. So that's kind of my story. I mean, let's see what it's been. It's been almost 3 years now. And over that time, I've learned so much. I mean, I think I've learned how to write a little bit better. At least I hope so. I feel like it's gotten a lot better in the last 3 years. I've learned how to turn the camera on and just start talking. When I started my podcast, I literally wrote every single thing down word for word. And I'm a little bit better now. I usually have an outline of what I'm going to talk about. But there are a lot of things that I can just sit down and talk about now, which it takes a lot of confidence. It takes a lot of not worrying about what other people say, because when you're on social media a lot, there are a lot of wonderful, amazing, sweet, kind people, but there are also some people who are not very nice. And there are people who say things that I swear they would never say them to my face. And dealing with that is kind of like, that brings me back to dealing with the narcissistic guy. And it's like, okay, block and delete. I don't need that kind of negativity in my life. I need the positive, the positive energy, the good vibes that people talk about. Okay, so the other part of the question was, how do you solve the INFJ identity crisis? And I know all about the identity crisis because I felt it. I feel it at different times in my life. I like to think of your identity as a process, mostly because when you're young, you think that you're going to have one identity and you're going to be that person for the rest of your life. And what I've found is that I've probably had 5 or 6 different personalities or different identities, I guess you would say, in my life so far, and I'm only 35. I've also found that I act differently around different people, which is an INFJ thing, right? We are natural chameleons based on the people that we're around. So, and we are the most ourselves when we are that way because we like to make people comfortable, right? We want people who are around us to be happy. And so when we can make them happy, then we feel good. There's a limit to that though, right? Because we're so good at making people happy, we tend to attract a lot of people who are narcissistic, a lot of people who aren't very nice to us into our lives. And those end up being our friends and sometimes our bosses, coworkers, things like that. Some we can control, some it's a little bit more difficult to control, right? And in the past, I thought that I was a magnet for these people and like I didn't have any control over it. That there was just something wrong with me, right? Because we're kind of taught that as we grow up. Like people say things to us like, you're too quiet, you're too shy, you're too nice, all these things. And when they say those things, we get this idea that there's something wrong with us, right? That there's, like, my boss used to tell me, your personality is terrible, which is like, there's something wrong with you and you need to fix it. And so we already have this idea in our head, right? And so when people tell us you're too quiet or you're too nice, then that just reinforces this idea that you're broken and you're messed up. And that is totally not true. You are not broken, nor are you messed up. And there's nothing wrong with the way that you are. A lot of the problem is just that there are these people in our lives that tell us that there's something wrong with us, right? So the first step in your figuring out what your true identity is you have to remove these people from your life who tell you that you're difficult, the people who tell you that you're broken, the people who tell you that you're hard to love. Those are not the people that you should be spending a lot of your time with. And this process is extremely difficult, especially if you've never done it before. These people could be people like your parents, right? And that's incredibly difficult. It's hard to set boundaries with your parents. And anybody who tells you that it's not, they don't know what they're talking about, because it is. It's incredibly difficult because for me, like, I want to have a good relationship with my parents, right? But I also want to tell them to stop. And how do you balance that? For me, it's been a very, very difficult process. It helps that there's a lot of space between myself and my parents. I live 2,000 miles away from them, right? So that helps. But that also makes part of our relationship difficult too. I have changed the way that I think about difficult people, though. I used to think that I was a magnet for those people, but when you think about it that way, you are taking away all of your power, because it's almost like you have this victim mentality of like, I'm a magnet and there's nothing that I can do about it, right? But if you change it and you say, I allow those people to stay in my life, then it's like, oh, wait a minute. I have the power. If I'm allowing those people to stay in my life, I cannot allow those people to stay in my life too. And like I said, it's a painful process. A lot of us INFJs we don't have very many friends, but the friends that we do have are used to taking advantage of us. And so when we finally step up and say, this isn't going to happen anymore, then you go down the list of your friends and you're like, okay, I have 5 friends and each one of them is really good at taking advantage of me. Each one of them is really good at dumping all of their problems on me, but they don't have time to listen to my problems. Every single one of them is great at calling me and asking me to do something for them. But when I need help, they're not available. It's difficult to start to back away from those people. It's difficult to ask them for more. It's difficult to stand up and say, I deserve better. And I think this is where a lot of INFJs get flack about the door slam, because when we do finally stand up and say, I deserve better, a lot of people are like, nope, this has always been our friendship, and now you're changing the game? You can't change the game. That doesn't work. And so we've already told them, like, this doesn't work for me anymore, and I need something different. I deserve better. And they're like, no, you're not getting any better. This has always been our friendship, and you can't change it now. And so we're like, okay, I'm done. This is it. I'm not going to handle this anymore. I'm not dealing with this anymore. And there's the door slam, and people are like, oh, you're so rude. How can you cut people out of your life? And they don't know the whole story. They don't know that you've put up with years of basically abuse. They don't know that you tried to fix it. They don't know that you asked for more. But that's the best thing that you can do, is start setting boundaries. You know, people call a door slam toxic. It's not. It's called boundaries. And a lot of people too, one more thing about boundaries. A lot of people say there's a healthy way and there's a not healthy way to set boundaries. I agree, there is. But if you've never set boundaries before, if you don't know how to do that, then don't worry about healthy boundaries and not healthy boundaries. Just worry about starting to set boundaries. That's all that you have to do. Some people have told me that having space between myself and my parents is not healthy, and I don't agree with that. Space is a good boundary. If you've never set boundaries, then start there. You don't have to start with an open confrontation. You don't have to start with, you know, a conversation that could possibly destroy your whole family. Excuse me. You can just start with saying, okay, I need some space. I'm backing away a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's all that you know how to do, if that's all that you can do, that's a great place to start. Start there. So the next step in the INFJ identity crisis is to give yourself some time and some space. You need to get to know yourself. If you've spent so much time around, probably most of your life, around people who are telling you how you should be and telling you who to be, then you need to figure out who you are without those people. So once you get away from them, then it's like, okay, who am I? What do I want? What do I like? How do I want to spend my time? Even there was even little things for me, like my older sister is very narcissistic as well. And so she was really good at telling me things like, don't wear khaki pants because they make you look stupid and you should never wear khaki pants. So I heard that constantly while I was growing up and all kinds of things like that, right? So when I got older and I moved away from my family, I would go shopping for clothes and I would see some pants that I liked and I would hear this voice in my head saying, don't buy khaki pants. You look stupid when you buy khaki pants. You should only wear black pants. And so all the pants that I have are black. And it took me a while to say, oh, wait a second. It's not me that thinks that I look stupid wearing khaki pants. It's my sister, and her opinion no longer matters. My opinion matters. And if I want to wear khaki pants, I'll wear khaki pants. And it doesn't matter if they're in fashion or in style or whatever. It's totally fine that I'm like stuck in the early 2000s as far as my style goes. I'm okay with that. I don't need to adhere to anybody else's ideas about style and fashion. So give yourself some time and some space to get to know yourself, because it takes a while. It takes some exploring. It takes, and sometimes it takes a while to identify all those voices in your head that are telling you, no, don't do that, or you shouldn't do that. That's not okay. So you're just going to have to explore some things and figure out what you like. And the last thing too that's incredibly important is to spend some time in self-healing, to go down that road and explore things like your inner child, things like energy, all of those important things that have helped me so much. I've done things like hypnosis and meditation. I've learned so much about how to change your energy, which is like huge. This morning, I woke up with this text message that for me was like, I don't, it just like ruined my Monday. And I was angry. And I could feel it, like the kind of anger that's like you're just pissed off at the world and nothing's gonna make it better, and you're just ready to snap at every single person who says anything to you, right? And I was like, I don't want to feel like this. I hate feeling like this. It's terrible. So how do I change it? And in the past, I would just be like, I don't know, I'm just mad today, and that's just how it's gonna be, and everybody who gets in my way is gonna get it. Which I hate feeling like that, right? But now that I've learned about energy, I know all of the things that I was going over in my head. Like, I knew that I need to sit down and do some meditation. I need to tap into being willing and being open. I need to think about it, to recognize what's going on and to say, this is not okay, and we're going to change it. And I can change it. I have the power to change it. And I'm not just going to be angry and upset all day long. That is not okay. So I did. And it was difficult and it felt weird and icky. And it was like, I don't know if this is going to work. But the more that you lean into it, the more that you're open to it, even though it feels weird, then you notice that it starts to change and you notice that your energy starts shifting. And it's like, okay, I don't feel so angry at everything. Not every single thing that happens today is like out to get me. It's not all because of me. It's not like people hate me. It's everything is actually good. It's going to be okay. I can focus on something that's positive. I can say, this is a safe space and all is well. And it's going to be a good day today. There's going to be great things that happen today. It doesn't have to be Monday is horrible. It can be Monday is a great opportunity. So yeah, that is how to solve your identity crisis. It's this huge process that it's a little bit at a time and then it's all of a sudden. And it makes such a huge difference when you focus on self-healing and understanding yourself, getting to know yourself. It's made such a huge change in my life that I want to help other people do the same thing. I want to help you if you're struggling with depression or anxiety, or if you're just an INFJ who's like, I don't know how to navigate this thing called life. And I feel angry and upset all the time. I'm overwhelmed. People take advantage of me all the time. I don't know what to do. I know what to do. And I can help. And I so want to help. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm pushing myself to do all of these things so that I can help you. I can share all of this information with you that I've learned because I want to help you. I know that it can be better. I know that there's hope and that you don't have to focus on so much that's negative and so much that's wrong. There's hope out there. You can change, even if it's difficult. It can get so much better. That's why I'm doing some workshops next week. It's called Here for This, and it's going to be a workshop every single day next week at noon Eastern time. I would love for you to join me. We're going to talk about a lot of the stuff that we talked about today. We're going to dive deeper into self-healing, into getting to know yourself more, understanding your personality, how to set boundaries, how to step away from people who aren't good for you, and how to figure out who you are. And I'm going to share with you everything that I've learned about energy, how to shift your energy, and how to focus on being happy. One of the main things for me, especially because I have depression, I thought that I couldn't be happy. I thought that I was one of those people who just didn't know how to be happy. My grandma was like that. And my mom always used to say things like, she's just a mean person and she doesn't know how to be happy. And so I thought that that was me too, because I used to get compared to my grandma a lot. And I was like, oh, maybe I don't know how to be happy either. Maybe it's like genetic, you know? And I certainly also felt like I always had low self-confidence. I didn't know what self-love was, and I thought that I was born without it. And so over the past 5 or 6 years, it's been this huge realization for me that people aren't born without self-love. It's something that you learn, and some people learn it when they're young, and some people don't. So the people who don't, like me, we have to learn it later in our lives. And it's a process, and it takes some time to figure out, one, what it is, and then to convince yourself that it is something that you can have, and then to start to practice it every single day. It takes a while, but there is hope. I've done it. I've been there. I know what it feels like. And like I said, I want to share all this information with you. So if you find yourself stuck, if you don't have enough confidence, if you don't know how to be happy, if you feel like you're in an identity crisis, or you just have a lot of friends around you who aren't good for you, maybe you're struggling with your family, maybe you've been told that you're wrong, and you believe that, I really hope that you'll come to my workshops next week. I made them especially for you. I want to help you. I know how to help you. And so I hope that you'll show up. It takes you showing up. That's one of the biggest steps, right? So you can find the link. The link is on Facebook if you're on Facebook. If you're on Instagram, the link is in my bio. There are tons of graphics in there that talk about the workshops are called Here for This, and there's like a bright green graphic. The link is also in my stories as well. And you can find it at infjwoman.com/hereforthis. So, all right, that's it. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I will see you here again tomorrow. I will be here. And if you have a question that you want me to answer, please go to my stories on Instagram. There's one of the stories has a question box there. It just says ask me a question. So you can put a question in there, or you can send me a direct message on Instagram as well, and I will answer some more questions tomorrow. All right, you guys, have a good Monday. So you just watched that video, and I'm sure you enjoyed it. If you want some more amazing information about INFJs, check out these videos right now. I'll see you there.